What up YouTube? Before I kick this video off today, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who has subscribed over the past couple of months. I think that last night we hit like 370 subscribers or something insane like that. So thank you to everybody who's been watching the videos, and I definitely plan on continuing to bring this content to you every single week. So let's get right into it. Towards the end of my last video, I mentioned that prior to starting this YouTube channel, I had never actually done any sort of urban or street photography whatsoever. Prior to this YouTube channel, my main focus in photography was anything landscape related, whether it be photographing giant mountains or a vista overlooking a lake or autumn colors or anything like that was really what I focused on shooting. Since then, I've started working my day job much more and more. I actually graduated college, relocated here to Boston, and I started working a heck of a lot more than I was previously. So I haven't really had a ton of opportunities to travel and get to awesome landscape related places most recently. Initially after moving, I wasn't really getting out and shooting at all. I was kind of just on the weekends sitting around not taking photos and playing video games and things like that because I wasn't really excited or inspired to shoot the things that were around me. But I kind of got tired of not shooting, and so I decided I was gonna just take advantage of where I was and kind of change up my photography style. And around the same time, I decided, you know what, I'm gonna start making YouTube videos because it's gonna force me to get out and start shooting. So what I wanna talk about today is my transition from landscape photography to urban and street photography and just kind of the things that I've learned along the road. Initially, what I was doing was a lot of cityscape type photography, just capturing city skylines or different sort of landscapes within an urban environment, so to speak. But after a while of doing that, I kind of realized that a lot of my photos were really cliche and just super repeatable, and I always felt like it was things that people had captured in the past hundreds or maybe even thousands of times, and I was just kind of repeating other people's work. So about 4 months ago, I decided to take the plunge into street photography. If you don't know what street photography is, I'll read you the definition according to Wikipedia. So street photography, also oftentimes called candid photography, is photography conducted for art or inquiry that features unmediated chance encounters and random incidents within public places. So what I want to talk about today is my transition from landscape photography to street photography and just kind of the things that I've learned over the past very short 4 or 5 months. One of the first things that I learned about street photography is that gear doesn't matter as much. It's not that it doesn't matter at all, it's just that it matters much less than it does in landscape photography. In landscape photography, I was constantly packing my bags full of the biggest, sharpest, most versatile lenses that I could possibly find. This is because I wanted to have my photos render as much detail as possible so that I could zoom in, see all the details, and everything like that. With street photography, that's much less important. It's much more important to just have a camera that's much more discreet and isn't really noticed by all of the people that are around you. Rather than having a DSLR camera with a massive zoom lens on it, it becomes much more important to have something that's tiny, maybe just a point and shoot camera or just a mirrorless camera with a small prime lens, so that the people around you don't notice you and they continue to act natural in their environment. With street photography, it's much less important to have super high optical quality, and it's much more important to capture a moment that's realistic in its environment. And that brings me perfectly into my next point. My second point is that moments are more important than locations. With landscape photography, the quality of your images are oftentimes defined by where you are and what your environment naturally looks like. 9 times out of 10, if you're shooting a photo of the Grand Canyon or of Bryce Canyon National Park or in Zion National Park, it's going to be a much better image than if you're just capturing a random obscure landscape in the middle of a place that nobody is really familiar with and that just doesn't naturally look cool. This is completely different with street photography. If you look at the work of people like Henry Cartier-Bresson or Vivian Maier, who are 2 of the more famous street photographers, their work is completely irrespective of the location that they're in. What they're aiming to do is capture a moment in time rather than a location. And so when you look at their work would be really good regardless of where they are. They're capturing people interacting with an environment, and it doesn't really matter what city they're in or what landscape they're in or anything like that. Their photography and their work would be phenomenal no matter where they captured it. The third point I want to talk about is that good light is much harder to find in street photography. With landscapes, there's 2 times a day that are generally regarded as the best times to shoot: sunrise and sunset. This is when the sky is changing colors and it's gonna make your landscape or whatever you're capturing the most interesting. With street photography, it's completely different. The sunset and sunrise aren't necessarily as relevant because when you're shooting in the streets of a city, oftentimes the sunrise and the sunset, like all that beautiful light, is being blocked by the buildings surrounding you. So what you're looking for in the city is kind of pockets of light that's potentially being reflected off of buildings, or maybe that's being cast down by a street lamp or something like that. And oftentimes, or at least for me, someone who's a newcomer to this, it's way harder for me to find good light in a city rather than finding it in a landscape where I'm just waiting for sunrise or sunset and I can know exactly what time the good light is gonna come. As a street photographer, you need to understand how the light is going to interact with the city at different times of day. So you need to understand when the light is going to come down certain streets, how it's going to reflect off certain buildings at different times of the day. And that's way harder, at least for me to do, than just waiting for the sunset to happen. The 4th thing I want to talk about is that in street photography, vision is much more important than technical skills. With landscape photography, my technical skills were oftentimes really important. I spent a ton of time setting up my camera on a tripod, putting on filters like a graduated ND filter and a polarizer, and maybe even doing things like exposure bracketing or doing time lapses or multiple exposures in order to simulate a long exposure. And so it was a lot of technical skills. And then oftentimes with landscapes, I would bring it into Photoshop and make a whole bunch of changes in order to make the photograph look the way that I envisioned it. With street photography, it's completely different. With street photography, a lot of these technical skills get thrown out the window. And what's really important is your vision, being able to understand exactly how the different things in your environment interact with one another and how you can leverage them in conjunction with one another to create a beautiful image. So understanding how the light is going to come down the street at a certain time of day, when different people come out of buildings, how people interact with the city, and things like that become much more important than understanding how to get the perfect exposure of some insane landscape. The 5th and final thing that I've learned about street photography is that you need to be willing to get out of your comfort zone. With landscape photography, I had become used to being completely secluded from other people in the wilderness, capturing something just completely away from other people. Whereas with street photography, I needed to get used to kind of being close and surrounded by other people and actually capturing other people in my scenes in order to make a beautiful photograph. A lot of my favorite work is very detail oriented. And so people like 6 Street Under, otherwise known as Craig Whitehead, he takes some beautiful images. I'll show some of them here. But his photos are very detail oriented, and he's super comfortable with getting close to people and capturing them in their environment. And so this, for me, is something that I've had to get used to and something that I'm still trying to work my way through right now. At first, trying to capture images like this was absolutely terrifying to me, but as time goes on, I'm getting more and more comfortable with it, and I think that I'm just gonna continue getting better at it as time goes on. I've been doing street photography now for about 4 or 5 months, and I'm constantly trying to get better and better at it. If you're not already subscribed and you're interested in following along on my journey, hit that subscribe button below. I make videos like this every single week, all about street photography and even about the behind the scenes of all of my photography. If you haven't already, hit that thumbs up button as well. It really helps out the channel. Thank you all a ton for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the video next week. Peace.